The Canon RF 1200 and 800mm lenses start shipping on May the 26th. At $19,999 and $16,999 respectively, they certainly aren't cheap. Details coming up, but first I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you're kept informed on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. If you have the budget for either of these two behemoths, I've got the links down below to B&H. The 1200mm f8 L series image stabilized USM is based on the 600mm. It's considerably lighter compared to the EF 1200mm at 7.4 pounds, and it does have improved image quality. The Super-Spectra coating and air sphere coating reduce or eliminate, depending on your shooting scenario, ghosting and flare. It has a minimum focusing distance of 14.1 feet, 4 stops of optical image stabilization, 3 image stabilization operation modes, and customizable electronic focus ring, and with a manual focus capability that's available when shooting with Servo AF. 1200mm not good enough for you? No worries. Canon's got your needs in mind. Simply attach the Canon RF 1.4x extender or the 2x extender. The 800mm is wider at f5.6 and also an L series with image stabilization, and it's a USM lens. It's a Super-Telephoto fixed focal length lens based on the 400mm. It weighs 6.9 pounds, has a minimum focusing distance of 8.53 feet, and like the 1200mm, it works with either the 1.4 or the 2x extenders. Optical image stabilization is better than the RF 1200mm with up to 4.5 stops of shake correction, has 3 image stabilization operation modes, and has the Super-Spectra and sphere coating to help reduce ghosting and flare. Okay, so at $20,000 or $17,000 without any taxes, customs, or shipping, these are definitely out of my price range. But if you're considering them, please use my links down below in the description for either of these lenses through B&H. I do love Super-Telephotos. I've got the f11 right here, and I'll admit, the autofocus is a little bit slow, which is why I use it in manual focus most of the time. And at f11, it does cause some problems when shooting in low light situations, or in the wintertime when light is not really hitting us that directly here in the Canadian North. But I still love it. It's one of the most enjoyable lenses I've ever shot with. And one of the most enjoyable things I've done with it is shooting the planets, is shooting the moon. And shooting the moon is easy. It's pretty bright. You don't have to worry about any sort of issues with it. It's just amazing the results you can get. It's really just about fine-tuning the autofocus and shooting on a clear, not humid night. The humidity in the air can make a huge difference between those craters being sharp and crystal clear along the edges, or it being kind of blurry and going, not so good. So keep that in mind. If you're shooting, you want to be on a dry night, away from any sort of light pollution, and the results are absolutely spectacular. But the other area where it's really interested in shooting is when I started shooting Jupiter and the 4 moons, I could actually pick up the banding, and it was absolutely amazing. But when compared to the 800mm f5.6 or the 1200mm f8, in terms of sharpness, in terms of aberration, the difference is night and day. I would just love to be able to take the 1200mm and the 800mm, take it outside, shoot Jupiter, shoot the moon, and put on that 2x extender and then shoot them again. I would just be truly impressed with it. These lenses, the clarity of the lens is just truly amazing. And in terms of the weight reductions over the old EF lenses, it's truly amazing. And yes, I get it. They are based off of the 400mm and of course the 600mm. It's not a complete redesign as Nikon has done. And now let's talk about the elephant in the room, and it is that Nikon 800mm f6.3. And yes, it's about a third of a stop, not as wide, but still, it's a third the price. And I've talked about this before. I don't doubt that the Canon 1200mm and 800mm are super sharp, but I can't imagine that Nikon's 800mm f6.3 is any slouch either. And it's not exactly like it's cheap. It's not like it's got the same quality as the Canon RF 800mm f11. It's $6,300, $6,500. It produces really good quality. I would like to see these side by side in the shootout, but still, if you kind of look at it this way, you can pick up the Nikon Z9, you can pick up the Nikon 800mm f6.3, a 2TB Angelbird CF Express card Mark II, or you can get the 1300. That's the one that can shoot a minimum sustained write speed of what, 1,480 megabytes per second. Pretty staggering. You can get all that and still pay less than you would for the Canon RF 800mm f5.6. However, if you're a Canon shooter, well then obviously it makes sense to stick with Canon. And of course, we want to see how these lenses look side by side. And other than pixel peaking, and yes, there is times to do pixel peaking. So for example, if you're shooting Jupiter and its moons, Well, you do a lot of pixel peeping, just even to pull the focus, because when you're out there shooting and you're trying to get the focus, it's a little harder with the 800mm because it's not like you would go outside just before the sun sets and focus on your shed, which is 20 feet away. And then when it gets dark, that same focus range is going to have everything in the skies in focus. When shooting with an 800 or 1200mm, that distance moves into kilometers or miles, so it becomes a little more difficult. But either way, it doesn't take too long to set up the focus. And usually what I end up doing is pressing the magnifier so I can get right in and pixel peep to be able to pull the focus so that Jupiter's in sharp focus. The next thing that's very, very critical is making sure that you don't overdo the aperture. You really want to tune it down a little bit. With my R5, it's somewhere around 2500. It depends on what you're going for. If you want to really showcase the moons and Jupiter, you're going to turn up, you're going to gather more light, which is going to overexpose things, and they're more or less just going to be point lights. But if you dial down to be able to show the banding of Jupiter, then what happens is the moons are far less noticeable. So it depends on the look you're going for. But yeah, I really find it very exciting to shoot this. And of course, I haven't even talked about wildlife, which is an awful lot of fun too. I've had a lot of fun shooting wildlife. There was a situation a couple of years ago. I was going for a walk. I was out in the wild and I saw beavers. There was a pair of them and they were building their structure, their habitat. I was so excited. It was end of December. I rushed home, got my tripod, got the 800mm, came out, and they were still there busy working ahead. It was around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so the light wasn't very good, so there's some distortion and aberration, but I realized with the lens on them that these guys weren't beavers. They were muskrats. They didn't have the webbed feet, and they didn't have the flat tail. But still, the excitement that I get with shooting with a Super-Telephoto lens like the 800mm f11 is an awful lot of fun. So for the rest of us, ordinary filmmakers and photographers, if you haven't played around with a Super-Telephoto lens, whether it be the 800mm f11, whether it be 150 to 600mm, try it. It's an awful lot of fun. I would say that this 800mm has given me the most enjoyable moments. I have more fun with that lens than I do with pretty well anything else. To me, it's kind of like the party animal of the lens lineup. And I get it, there aren't a lot of Sigma or Tamron lenses, so we don't have a lot of, well, I don't think there are any third-party Super-Telephoto lenses for the RF mount at this point, but I do suspect they will be coming online pretty soon. Anyhow, if you want to get the latest updates on what new lenses are coming out, camera bodies, or anything like that, go ahead and subscribe, but make sure you choose all notifications. By choosing all notifications, what happens is as soon as I publish a video, you're going to get notified, so that way you get to stay up to date on the latest camera news and rumors. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.